Good evening. October's theme for Centers for Spiritual Livings is part of our theme this evening and for the month. It is Global Transformation through Individual Transformation. And this week's topic is that we encourage our community members to live in courageous, fearless lives and to be passionate about its possibilities. And our topic for this evening is live in passionate, fearless courage. So at this point, I would like to consider the world and everything we see in it. Everything we see, everything in visible form is an effect. Once we can realize and live from the understanding that all of the effects we see are the result of an idea, and this idea is the real cause behind all of the effects. When we are able to embody this is when each of us begin to see the world through new eyes. So, knowing and believing this, that it is God, Spirit, that is behind each and every one of us in every way, and that everything that manifests is an idea in the mind of the divine, which is expressed through us, as us, in our own unique, individualized expressions, this realization is what gives us courage, that gives us faith, that gives us a drive where we can walk out or leave our comfort zones and experience that fearless courage while doing so. So having this consciousness where one realizes that God is all that there is and that God is backing us, it is God that is on our team, so to speak, and it is God that has our back. Don't you feel that this type of consciousness is very empowering? And from this empowerment, this I so believe is what causes one to have that fearless courage to step out of that zone of comfortableness and experience all of the fabulous, magnificent, and infinite possibilities that are out in the ethers for each and every one of us to experience, if we so desire, and if we are open and receptive to all of those infinitesimal possibilities. So please remember that all of these infinite possibilities are there for us because of who we are and whose we are. One with, one of, and one from the divine, made in its own likeness. So when I think of cause and effect, the slide that is used, I believe it's in the Beyond Limits class, that slide of the iceberg. And what is depicted on that slide is you see the tip of the iceberg, then there is a waterline, and then you see all of the ice underneath, below the surface of the water that you do not see. The only part that you see is the visible part, the tip of the iceberg. And I feel that tip that we are seeing manifests in visible form because we see it, and below the surface is of the iceberg, of the water that you don't see, is that of the invisible, that what is supporting the manifestation of what we see, the tip of the iceberg. So I relate to spirit and all it takes for supporting what one sees in visible form. I relate that to spirit being the supporter of it. all that you don't see in manifestation, all that is backing it, behind it, it is all God, it is all the divine. So there's a lot of support, a lot of backing that is invisible to see. But yet, we're able to manifest because of that invisible power that is the divine. So that slide makes it all clear to me in relation to all that is in back of visible form. So each and every one of us will always be a work in progress. I believe this, of us being a work in progress, up until the time that we transition. And during the journey, when we limit our idea of ourselves, we are also limiting the possibilities of the world in which we live in. Remember, the creative mind cannot stop creating. It creates and creates and creates. And Dr. Holmes has so many times in his writings reminded us of that since the creative mind cannot stop creating, it is always creating something through and for us, each and every one of us. So I invite each of you to examine your personal lives. Examine what is showing up in your personal lives. How do you like it? How do you like it? Examine what is manifesting in your lives for you to experience. How do you like it? When you do this, you're really checking in on your thoughts, your beliefs, and your feelings. You are really checking in on those three things. Again, getting back to the creative mind and the creative process, remember this: what we impress upon the law through our thinking, through our beliefs, and our words, the law says, yes, you have it. Here it is. The law is impersonal. It is the server of our thoughts. So it's very important to keep a check on our thoughts, on our beliefs, on our feelings, and the words we speak, because it is that impress on the law. And the law creates what has been impressed upon it. As I said, the law is our server, our servant, which again is impartial. It does what it is impressed upon it. So I'm very sure you've heard here at CSL Boston about weeding your garden. The garden being our mind. The weeds being all of the thoughts that no longer serve us. Those weeds, as in the garden of our mind, those thoughts, or the garden in your yards, the vegetative plants. The weeds are always going to show up. They're always going to show up every now and then. And us being good stewards of our gardens in our yards or in our mind, when we keep those weeds from the garden keeps its beauty. The garden thrives. And when we weed out all of those that does not serve us anymore, that is when our lives become more beautiful, more magnificent. And that is when we experience the bliss of life that is each and everyone's birthright because of who and whose we are. Remember, we are the co-creators here. We are the co-creators for what manifests in our lives. And when we look at all of the great tools that the science of mind gives us, those tools help each and every one of us to change the way we look at the possibilities in our own lives. And when I walk in that I am consciousness, when I embody the facts that it is God that is behind all and that God has my back and that God is on my team, that helps me to be rooted in faith and in courage. And that makes the path for us to step out of that zone or box of comfortableness, that box or zone of surety. It makes it easier to accomplish taking that step out of what is comfortable for us. So remember this, God is the macrocosm. God is infinitesimal possibilities. And we, each and every one of us, we are made in that likeness and image of this divine power. And because of that fact, the fact that there are infinitesimal possibilities that each of us could experience, because we are one with that power, those possibilities are in our reach. They're there for us to grab onto. Those possibilities are there for each and every one of us. That's a great thing, I believe. Knowing that all of those possibilities are there for the receiving, put it that way. You must be able to receive them. They are out there. They have really been given. It's already in the ethers. All we have to do is realize who and whose we are. So really, it's absolutely feasible to think big, to have great visions, to get rid of all of those thought patterns, those old tapes that are limitations that we place upon ourselves. Those are the weeds. Those are the things we need to pull out of our garden and lovingly release them. So here's a quote from Dr. Holmes and William Keener from A New Design for Living. We should always be breaking down patterns of thoughts and creating newer ones of greater vision. And I believe another reason this is so is because each and every one of us have the right to experience all of those infinitesimal possibilities because, like I said before, of whose and who we are. And another quote I want to share with you is by Dr. Holmes and William Hornaday from Help for Today, and it states, "We all know as though something inside were forever telling us that we were created not only to live and work, but also to be happy, purposeful, and enthusiastic." So this brings up for me my story that I'd like to share with you. Many, many years ago, my ex, who was a costume designer, and I, because I was his assistant, we were hired to do the Jaffra convention in South Beach, Florida. We were part of the production staff as the costume designers. And the week before any show for a costume designer, it's really called Hell Week, because what happens the week before is you're constantly working to making sure everything is perfect for the opening night. So you work night and day. You work hour on top of hour. It's amazing. The energy is just there, and you are really like a machine. So for that whole week before, we were in this production room, and that's where we were staying most of the time, other than going to our hotel to get some sleep. Well, one morning, the producer sent a limo for my ex and I, and that limo took us to a beautiful place for breakfast. And another night, the producer took all of the production staff to this very exclusive club restaurant in South Beach, and he just lavishly, had us have a beautiful evening of eating and socializing, etc. And the day after the show closed, he took all of the production staff to this lovely hotel on the beach, and for the entire day, we ate and drank anything we wanted and just had a good time. because this man was so grateful for all of the workers who produced such a successful and beautiful show for that company, that makeup company, Jaffa Makeup Company. So his theory was, he lived by this, and he made everyone hear this, because this was who he was. He says, one must play as hard as they work. There is no need to work hard and not enjoy and play hard. There's no purpose in that. And he made it his life to make sure he would have a phenomenal balance between his playtime and his work time. And this, he said, always gave him a real nice balance where he could enjoy life and not only be there working, etc. So my lesson is this, from all of this, is that we're all here to live and work and have purposeful meaning in what we do and be happy and have fun while we're in this vibration. I invite each and every one of you to contemplate what Dr. Holmes, William Hornaday, and what that producer said, as I just have finished mentioning my producer's quote. Thank you.
Wow. Living in passionate, fearless courage. Would you agree that we here at Center for Spiritual Living Greater Boston encourage our community members to live courageous, fearless lives and to be passionate about its possibility? Would you agree with me or would you disagree with me? So, where does the courage and fearless life begin? This is a good question. I think Reverend Ed had some great points in part of that. But I want to talk about this a little deeper because he does talk about, our spiritual toolbox, our spiritual practices. So, to me, it begins with our connection with the indwelling presence. It begins by our feeling our oneness, remembering our oneness. And we do this through meditation, through journaling practices, through spiritual mind treatment, which is our form of affirmative prayer. We do this through visioning. We do this through reading inspirational materials that lift our mind and our consciousness up out of our current situation into the higher level of consciousness, which is our truth, which is who we are. And Reverend Ed spoke to this when he said that it's who and whose we are. Because it is God as me. When I can get to that level of consciousness, of being God as me, my life is running in harmony and balance. Just like he spoke of with that wonderful man who provided them with great play and great joy in their activities, it's the same idea. We need to find that balance and that harmony. So basically, with all of these spiritual practices, this is how we open ourselves up to this courageous and fearless life. From here, I think it is important to see if we are creating our lives as small personal worlds that separate us from life, or are we connecting with the allness of life, reaching out into the bigger world? Are our spiritual practices calling us to do something more? And I think many times it is. And sometimes it just appears as whatever that creative expression is that's calling to your heart. The question to ask is, do I see myself as part of it all, or do I find that I am separated? Am I doing things that separate me? If I find that the places that appear separate, I can take that into prayer work and spiritual practice to see if I need to move in a more courageous and fearless way in the area of my life. Does anybody have a secret, or maybe a not so big a secret, passion for service or expression that will take you beyond yourself? To be in larger service in the neighborhood, the city, the state, or the world community? Does anyone have a secret passion, or maybe a not-so-secret passion? Calling them calling from within, from that indwelling place when we do our spiritual practices. When I feel that I need more courage in my life, I stop and remember that God is for me, so what could be against me? God is for me, so what possibly can be against me? Many times the only thing that's against me is me, my thinking, my limited ideas. And I transcend those with using these spiritual practices, meditation, spiritual mind treatment, to clear and open the channels. My favorite spiritual mind treatment is for guidance and clarity, because that is always the place that opens me up to my higher self, to be more than I am. So when it comes to realizing this understanding that God or the divine is all there is, and if that's all there is, then it has to be for me, because it's expressing as me and through me, so it needs to have me to move through the world. And why is it going to bring me pain or difficulty? Only if that pain or difficulty is going to allow me to grow to a higher level. That's where the courage comes in. That's where that fearlessness comes in. This gives me the ability to step out in courage and in fearlessness when I realize that God is all there is, that the divine is my support and my source and my substance. It's easy to step out into the world in that way. Has anyone ever noticed that when we put ourselves out there in life, that new opportunities tend to show up, or new individuals show up in our life that bring us to that next level? There's always something, or maybe it's a spiritual reading or something that's calling to your heart. Whatever that is, it always shows up when we step out in courage and in fearlessness. I always like to say this old saying, when the student is ready, the teacher appears. How often has that been true? I know for myself, and I'm sure for many of you, that it has been the truth, that it has showed up, that perfect teacher shows up just when you are in that place of being ready to move forward into whatever it might be. I know it's hard to believe this, but when I was young, I was extremely shy. I wanted to be invisible. I wanted to disappear. I used to be known as the kid in the security jacket, and even in the summer I'd be wearing this heavy jacket, this corduroy jacket that I think my mother wanted me to throw away because it stunk, probably because I never take it off. I'd take it off when I got home and then just probably grab it and wash it or something. But I never took the jacket off. Even in the warmest of classrooms, I'd sit in that jacket because it was like I could hide in that. It's like I was able to be in that place of hiddenness that made me feel safe because I was so painfully shy. But in high school, I was blessed to, at one point, as I was going to a class, I walked by the theater department and the people were acting really crazy and silly. And there was something there that said, you know what? I need to find out about that. And the next semester, I was in theater class. And I was attracted to a teacher in that theater class who was very meek and very quiet and very soft-spoken, and actually started us with mime. So I didn't have to speak. All I had to do was move. And that moved into the next step, musical theater. I got involved in that. I then moved on to the dramatic theater, spoken words. But I was not myself. I was a character. So it was easy for me to get up there and do that, even in my shyness. But what has happened is, those were the steps that started me in the right direction, and I showed up and said, I'm going to be brave and courageous and step out, and the perfect teacher showed up who could guide me through and step me forward into those steps to bring me to that next level, and this is where I am today. Today, I'm standing in front of you, talking to you about something that I am passionate about. A life that works, a life that is perfect and whole and complete, even in those times when it appears not to be. Because I realize that there is this power. And all of those steps brought me to this place. All of the steps in your life have brought you to where you are today. You are here for a reason. So really embrace that reason and let it bring forth the highest and the best in you. We are meant to be a part of this amazing creation that the divine has brought forth. It has provided it for us to live in and be a full part of and not separate within it. So when the mind says, "Ooh, I need to separate myself," we know it's time to say, "No, that's not the truth. Let me do my spiritual practicing. Let me do my indwelling work, my work to connect with my indwelling presence. And from there, allow myself to move forward back into that life flow." Certainly we need to pull ourselves away. That's what we do our spiritual practices for. But we still need to move back out into the world and be alive and be awake. So join me in surrendering through spiritual practice to the indwelling presence and allow it to be the guide that shows us the courageous, fearless spirit that resides in the essence of our being. As we connect to this courageous, fearless spirit, which is the first cause that resides in us, we are called to share our light in the world. We are called to share our light in the world. Share your personal story and watch how it takes you out of your old limited ideas of yourself and how it ignites passion in the lives of everyone who listens. It excites people. It brings them into excitement. Ernest Holmes said, "We need a big concept of the fundamental nature of life, God, the universe. We need to know there is a limitless abundance of all things good." And if that's the truth, which I believe it to be, then if all things are good, then I should walk out courageously and fearlessly into life, unafraid, knowing that I have God at my back, as Reverend Ed said, God's got your back. Always.